let's look at what we're going to look at tonight. Okay, so tonight, through the use of the model essays, and we're going to focus on 2 tonight, I will create a game plan to write rhetorical analysis essays that include a link to the thesis statement, embedded text evidence, and a thorough explanation of how the evidence supports the claim. Okay, so think about your learning intention and set a goal for yourself right now. What do you hope to gain from tonight's, what do you hope to gain from tonight's stream? You got something? Okay, those of you who are joining us, we are using Nearpod for our lesson today. And just a quick reminder, if you're new to Nearpod, if you click that black arrow down up at the top, if you go ahead and click on that, I'll do that for you over here. It's going to bring up the option for notes. So you will be able to actually see what the notes are. So that's a pretty helpful tool, if you will, to kind of look at that. And then you can save it on your drive, and that will give you all of the slides from tonight. So that will be helpful to you, I think. So you just touch the little arrow and then open up the notes window. And I always do save to Google Drive, but you can do it however you choose. Just an extra little tip. Okay. So now we all know where we're going tonight. The question is, how will we get there, right? So tonight's text, we're going to look at the 2019 prompt and specifically question 2, Gandhi's letter. So I have mine here. And if you checked your email, if you were registered early, you should have yours too. Do you have it? Or if you don't, we'll get it for you. Here we have the prompt. I have mine annotated. Did you guys annotate it? Can you give me a thumbs up? Where are you at? Did you annotate it as well? It's a big thing, I think. It can really help out making sure that you have that there as a tool to have it and have a little bit of a heads up. And I think our Lang team does a pretty good job. Really, all of our subjects do a good job of making sure that you have a few of these things first. So here's what I want you to do. Have you read the text? Have you read the text? See. Okay. All right. So it looks like I think so is the answer. Now, that's a huge thing because sometimes when I read text, I read it and then I'm like, I think I read it, but I'm not really sure. So we're going to look at it. And hopefully, if you've read it, it will help you and you'll kind of come along and remember it and recognize it here in a few minutes. So we went over our learning intention. The first thing we're going to do is a quick review of FRQ2 expectations and a quick review of the writing plans. And then we're going to roll right into tips for using the model essays. And we're going to do some model essay interactions. So this Nearpod interface is pretty cool because it will let you interact with me. I've got some collaborate boards and all sorts of fun stuff set up. So if you're not there, and you want to join in, you're welcome to. You can go to nearpod.com and then join with the code UCFGP. UCFGP. And that's going to allow me to just kind of give you a few resources throughout the time, some interaction going back and forth and really kind of help us out. So I'm super excited. Are you? Okay. We're going to play a game. Does that sound fun? I love the idea of a game. Okay, so I'm going to hop over to my screen over here because I have it set up as a student on my screen, but I'm going to kind of stall on mine because I want to see what you guys know, not what I know, okay? And I don't want you to see my answers anyway. Okay, so pick your character. So fun. A winter penguin. All right, can you come join my game? Hi there. We're going to all be penguins today. You don't have to be a penguin. All right. Okay, so we see me in there, obviously. Any other players want to join us? You got a couple of you in here. That's a cool thing. I bought Nearpod. I can see you too. Okay. You want to get started? Thumbs up to get started. All right. Super quick. Go with your gut. I think you're going to know all of these answers, but let's just kind of see, okay? Okay. First question. The FRQ is question number what? What is your question number for FRQ 2? What is it? What do you think? Question number. Question number 2. It is question number 2. Okay, are you ready for the next one? I hope so, because here it is. For RA, students are given a passage of approximately 600 to 800 words and expected to analyze the writer's rhetorical choices. What do you think? What do you think? Okay, you ready? I think you guys have that answer. What's that answer? Yeah, that is true. 600 to 800 words is a huge relief because in some of our passages, you'll see that the passages are super, super long, and that is confusing. Okay, you ready? Next question. There's a standardized form for the rhetorical analysis prompt. In other words, like a fill-in-the-blank kind of format that they're going to use for what they put out there to you. What do you think? Do you have your answer? Is there a standardized form or format for the rhetorical analysis prompt? Yes, yes, there is. So you want to make sure that you are kind of looking at what that looks like now, because I think it's going to be easier for you to figure out the plan once you begin to fill in and see that standardized font. All right, stronger responses that score well tend to describe what is used in the stimulus text and why it is used. So stronger responses tend to say, hey, here's what it is, and here's why it's used. What do you think? All right, you ready? Okay. Now, this one's kind of a trick question because it's not about just what is used or why it's used. It's about what it's used, why it's used, and how it influences the meaning or the purpose overall. So how does it create that audience movement? Okay, are you ready? Last question. To earn points for evidence and commentary, I need to be sure to present and explain a line of reasoning. What do you think here? Are you ready? Are you ready? That one is true. Okay, so it seems like we have a pretty good understanding of what we're looking at here. So you can kind of see where your scores are. Look at our winner. Yay! Okay. That's kind of lame because Stephanie was in the background. That's me. I don't count, right? Okay, so let's think about those expectations, okay? So what are they? Well, you're going to be given 600 to 800 words, just like we talked about, and then you're going to analyze the writer's choices, and they are assessing your ability to respond to the prompt with a thesis that analyzes the writer's rhetorical choices. It needs to be defensible, of course, and then you want to select and use evidence that's going to support that line of reasoning and explain how it actually works through that process, okay? So demonstrate an understanding of the rhetorical situation. That means you personally need to read and understand what the rhetorical situation is of the stimulus text. And that's something that I think a lot of the model essays that don't score so well don't have evidence of understanding of that. And sometimes it's luck of the draw. I have a student who said, you know, I actually know this topic. I think I can do it really well. And sometimes we have students that are like, I know nothing about this. How in the world am I supposed to do it? But it's set up so that if you look at the context when they're giving you that essay, you'll have enough to work with and that you can kind of piece it together. So that's a neat tool and a neat thing to think about. And then, of course, that whole grammar and punctuation thing, right? Okay. So I wanted to make sure that everybody had the rubric. So if you have the rubric, if you don't have the rubric, how about now? Absolutely you do. Click that little button. It's going to open in a new tab. Now, if you're on your phone and you're following along, you'll just hit the X. It'll open it up. You've already inactivated your notes by hitting the little black arrow. So it should be good. It should follow through. And now you have the rubric. Now, this one is the one-page rubric. I often will share the one that has the scoring notes in it. And so you're going to see some screenshots of what that one looks like here in just a little bit. So those of you who are just joining us, we're using another fancy Nearpod lesson. You just missed a time to climb too. That's okay though. You can catch up and join in. Just go over to nearpod.com/join, and our code is UCFGP. So that's over there on the side in the comment box. That's fantastic. Okay. So now we've talked about our learning intention. The goal is that you're going to have a plan for how you can use those model essays to create your own plan. So then we looked at the expectations based on the course and exam description. What is expected of you as you get started? So the next thing I want to do is quickly review the writing plan. Now, if you weren't with us in our building blocks of the rhetorical analysis, you might not know some of this. So if you have any questions, add them over in the comment box on the side, and I will definitely answer those questions for you. But it's just kind of a review because we have gone through them, and I just wanted to make sure that everyone was aware of those. And I can actually send out, if you are a Plus member, when I send the email out at the end, I will actually include the streams that you want to go back and look at for a little more help on what those are. So that'll be a neat tool, and I make my little note to myself right here to add that to the email. So, and then again, you guys, your questions, anything that you have for me that you want me to add to that email, any resource, anything that you can think of, I'll track that for you as well. So the last streams. Okay. Are you ready? Moving on. Okay. So the first thing that we expect you to do is always to read and annotate the prompt, okay? It wants you to, I want you to look at it. I want you to think about things that you notice. I want you to think about things that you wonder about the text, all of those things that happen. But the first step is going to be to bat the prompt. So you've got to look at the prompt and figure out what in the world do they want from me? And then you need to read and annotate the stimulus text. So if you can take 8 to 10 minutes and do this part really well, then you're setting yourself up for success for the essay, okay? So, do you think you could bat the prompt for me? You want to try? So remember, with bat, you're just going to annotate that prompt and see what you got for me. So give it an annotation, and then let's see what you have. Just a minute there. Okay, you about ready? Okay. I got one submitted for me. Okay, let's look at this. Are you ready? Okay. So here we have an example that it's gone through, and we can see that they've kind of marked that Gandhi led a nonviolent march in India protesting it. So it's kind of outlined that very first sentence. And then it jumps down to the conclusion of the letter. And then it looks at analyze the rhetorical choices. So you kind of have an idea of what you're doing based on those annotations, right? You agree? Yeah, I think so too. But let's look at this. So if we annotate and we follow that BAT principle, we're looking at the background, the context that you can get, and then the advice, the they say, so I should, and then of course the task. Now, it seems kind of silly to look at the advice, and sometimes, especially with the new format, it's not going to be as much. It'll be more like read the passage carefully and then analyze the choices. So you can kind of see that. But notice this marking of that B, A, and T on the prompt. So this is significant because it outlines the key pieces that are going to be so important in helping you to draft your response. So as you look at it, you can see that there are a few things. It says that it's an excerpt because it's the conclusion, tells you that it's to Lord Irwin. It says eventually won India independence. So that means it didn't necessarily win it right this second. And then you can see this background. So even if I have no idea who Gandhi is, I can look at it and I can see from this, he led this nonviolent march, that it was looking at the monopoly and taxation of salt. I can see that it's about the salt march. And then in my head, I was like, ooh, I remember hearing about the salt march somewhere. And so then I was able to look at it and it says it's the civil disobedience movement. And I'm like, aha, because when I was studying transcendentalism, I remember this guy. So side note, I want you to look at the spelling of his name. Can you do that for me? Now, this is a teeny tiny pet peeve, but it's like a really big problem. Okay. So I have a friend who was at the reading, and at the reading, they said that the letter H was lost in many student responses. So it would be very helpful if you're not sure how to spell the person's name that you're writing about, or I guess who is responsible for the text that you're looking at. Just copy it. Like look at the prompt where it says it and then use it that way. So tiny little tip. Okay, so now you know what we're talking about when we say bat the prompt. So what does reading the text look like? When you are doing this on your own, what does it look like on your paper? How does your teacher know that you read the text? What does it look like? What does it look like? Okay, so you would mark in the text. What else does it look like? So it's a tricky question, right? Okay. So when we go through and we annotate the text, one of the strategies, or some of the strategies that we like to suggest here at Fiveable, are the IDA. And this is one that actually came from Brandon. And so the idea is that you go through, you read it, and you annotate it. And then while you're annotating, you look at what is happening, and you then go through and decide why the author is using it. And then when you're ready to write your essay, you kind of analyze how that device impacts the audience. So you might mark this like 1, 2, and 3 on your paper, or however you choose to do it. So another thing would be the idea of a TOBY. Now this one came from Catherine. You guys attend some of hers too? So this one came from hers. And the idea here is that when you are going through and you're reading and you're annotating on the page, you want to come up with your thesis. So that's that solid, defensible thesis statement that analyzes the writer's rhetorical choices. You want to just have a quick outline, and that might be little bullet notes where you're like ... It might be just arrows in the text where you've kind of written it and outlined it that way. But then at the end, you want to have a big idea. That's that overall image, the thing that makes this article worth studying all the way through the end. And the big idea is going to be the piece that kind of helps you with your conclusion paragraph. So if those things aren't going to work for you, or if you've never heard of them before, maybe your teacher uses DIDLS. Now, some teachers are using SpaceCat right now, which is totally cool. You can do that. But when we're annotating, we want to go through and come up with these little pieces that are going to help us out. So diction, imagery, details, language, and then syntax or shift. And I added that because if you Google it, it's just going to say syntax. But often there's a shift there, and you can very easily write about how it starts out this way, and then it shifts to this piece, and then it shifts to this piece, and why did we do that? And it can be anything from like the style of writing. It can be like a timeline thing. It can be a shift in the rhetorical function of this section of the text. So those are all pretty exciting things. Okay, so now we review the writing plan, and we're ready to keep rocking. Are you writing with me? So now we're going to look at the model essays that we have on AP Classroom. And how can we use these model essays to really help us out? So the first thing I'm going to do is I want to ask you, how do you approach the essay? What do you do when you're starting this whole process out? What's your strategy? So what's your strategy? Outline and make sure the key points of the task are hit. Yes, yes. Anybody else have a strategy? Maybe not at the moment. I know it's still early in the semester, and some of us may not have it until next semester. So when we are looking at how to build the RA, there are a few strategies that we like to recommend here at Fiveable. So we like to think about the rhetorical Precis as your introduction paragraph. Anybody familiar with it? Can you give me a thumbs up? Be like, yeah, I do the rhetorical Precis. Okay. So what it is you already know how to write a summary. Like you've been writing summaries for years. That's not what we need right here. What we need is an analysis of how it is said. That's what your goal is, okay? So the rhetorical Precis is going to take care of that thesis point, that solid defensible thesis that analyzes the writer's rhetorical choices, okay? All right, so the next piece is the body paragraphs. The topic sentence, the transition, these things are important. So you might consider things like the author's last name, begins with or by, or make your claim about the strategy, what works to address the purpose of the prompt, specific examples that support your idea. You want to give explicit evidence from the text, okay? But you want it to be like kind of woven in. And we're going to look at that here in just a few minutes when we do our interactions with the models, okay? And then you want to discuss how the example supports the idea. Got it? Now, these pieces are really important. So in just a few minutes, you're going to get to look at some that may not have that. Once you move beyond that first paragraph and you're looking at your additional paragraphs, you still need a topic sentence or some kind of transition. There's a couple of ideas here. You need to connect the ideas from the last sentence of the previous paragraph to this one. It can't be completely disconnected. Like this came out of left field, but you also don't want to like jump into the evidence without telling us what's going on there. So we want to make sure we have that topic sentence. Again, providing that evidence that's meshed together. You want it to blend, okay? And then that discussion of how the example supports the ideas continue again in this paragraph. Now, some people provide 4 paragraphs and they score really well. Some do 8 paragraphs and they score not so well. So really, it's that plan that you're going to come up with that's going to help you do better. Got it? Okay. So with this, I wanted you to have just a moment to focus a little bit more on the idea of evidence and commentary so you can kind of see what it is. This is an example of the rubric with the scoring notes. And I'll send this to you in the email. It tends to be something that I send to you anyway. So if you were with us at the beginning, the first link that I sent you was just the one page. But this lets you see And I want you to focus down on that lower element where it sort of explains it, that it uniformly offers evidence to support the claim, that it focuses on the importance of specific words and details from the passage to build an argument, that it organizes and supports an argument as a line of reasoning. Now, I have a lot of students who say, Ms. Kirk, what is a line of reasoning? What does that mean? And hopefully we're going to be able to see that as we go through some of these other sample responses. So you can kind of see those. But the idea is that you present your claim and that you go through and you thoroughly explain it, not only with the evidence from the text, but with the analysis, that commentary piece, okay? So then it says that with adequate evidence that is clearly explained. So you want to make sure that it makes the connection there and then it makes sense. And then that last piece, explain how the writer's use of rhetorical choices contributes to the student's interpretation of the passage. Whew, that's deep, because you got to write your idea about Gandhi's idea. And that's a lot to think about, don't you think? But I know that you can do it. Okay, so then that last piece is sophistication. So sophistication is kind of like the thesis statement. Either you have it or you don't, okay? But I think that the sophistication might actually be easier to earn if there's intentionality behind it and if you've really worked on that process along the way. Because realistically, you're looking at sophistication of thought and a complex understanding of the rhetorical situation. So you want to make sure that you've addressed all of these pieces, that you've looked at the rhetorical situation, that your writing shows that you have analyzed the rhetorical situation, and then that you're able to kind of make those connections. So when you look down here at the scoring notes, it says that they explain the significance or relevance of the writer's rhetorical choices given the rhetorical situation, that they explain a purpose or function of the passage's complexities or tensions, and that they employ a style that is consistently vivid and persuasive throughout the student response. So you've got three elements here that are really going to help you as you work to bring that sophistication point there. Okay. Are you with me so far? Yeah, thumbs up. Super exciting. Okay. So now we're ready to talk about the model essays. We're going to look at how can you use them. Have you guys ever used those before? In what way have you used it? I'm curious. Okay. Here's the deal. Now, I know a few AP Lang teachers, and I was speaking with one today that said, I gave my students a prompt, and it was like they looked it up and they Googled it and they knew exactly what it was. And I'm glad that they're really going to this website, and I'm glad they're using the resources that are available, but it's very frustrating because they're not going to have that option on the AP exam. And that's true. You aren't. But if you are using the model essays, I would encourage you to start with the oldest examples, okay? I know that the rubric has changed, but that's okay. Another thing you might do is to plan it to rotate based on your syllabus. So in my class, I focused first on just the basics of figuring out what the argument is that's being made, and then I moved straight into the rhetorical analysis aspect. Because once you can identify those claims and the evidence that go with it, I wanted them to evaluate that. And so if your teacher is doing 1 week of argument, 1 week of rhetorical analysis, 1 week of synthesis, then you want your rotation to kind of align with what your teacher's doing, okay? Now, I would say print it and mark it up. Look, I'm not lying to you. Do you see this? Like, this is every year. I'm going to do this every year. Print it out, mark it up. The more that you can track it, the more you can write it down, the better you're going to do. So make sure that you've done those things. Next, always read and annotate the stimulus text. Always. That's going to help you, because I know that sometimes I don't know what I just read, but I'm smart enough to know that in everything I don't get, there's something that I do. So fortunately, I don't have to analyze every single thing that happens in a stimulus text. Instead, I can break it down piece by piece and figure it out. I don't have that much time on the actual AP exam. So instead, I can focus on what I do know, and you can too. So once you get to the point to where you're looking at the sample essays that are provided to you, it is true that 2017 and older is all on a different rubric, but good writing is still good writing. So you can still use that to help you out and to kind of look at it. Look at the thesis statement. I say highlight those and topic sentences in yellow. Make sure you have them. Next, highlight quotes in pink and put analysis in green. Put your transitions and concluding sentences in orange. Make sure you have these colors in your paper. And then at the end, once you've gone through, use those sample essays and use your chief reader scoring notes to check your own analysis. Does that make sense? Okay. So if you don't want to write, you're like, you know what? I've written too much this week. I'm not going to write it at all, but I can commit to like reading a little bit of stuff. Read the stimulus text, okay? Start there. Track your analysis. What do you think it's about? Check the scoring notes. Were you right with what you thought that the text was about? Because sometimes that's the hardest part, is making sure that you're right on track, and you do not want to be wrong about it when you write your essay. Then read and annotate the higher essays. I'm not telling you to write the essay. I'm just saying, look at the ones that are high and kind of fix them. Draw some conclusions. The more you look at strong writing, the more you're going to recognize the characteristics of each paragraph. And then you can use those characteristics to create your own checklist of what to do. So you don't really have to write if you use this process. But if you're feeling fruity, or if you know that your handwriting needs some help, or you need to learn which pen's going to be your favorite pen for the test, then go ahead and write it out. Start with the stimulus text. Track your analysis over the time. Write the response. If you don't want to outline, or if you don't want to write the whole entire essay, then just write an outline. Be detailed. This is what I would talk about. You might have like a bulleted note for your topics. You might just mark which pieces of text evidence you're going to use, and you might use the why aspect. You might even use a T-chart on your page with the what and the why, and then add a column for how. And then make sure you incorporate all of those pieces into your writing. And then read and annotate the sample essays. The information that you see in those high-scoring essays, that's going to help you recognize whether you're on the right track or the wrong track for whether you understood the text. Then you can score the essays. Actually try, actually practice. And this one's so important to me. Fix the broken essays. So there was a time when I thought, you know, my students see enough examples of bad writing. I'm not going to show them anymore. But then I had this like big thing, like if we don't recognize where the holes are, we can't fill them in. So look at some of those broken essays and make them better. Next, compare your understanding to the chief reader's notes and the high-scoring essays. And then revisit your essay, critique it with what you now know. Change your essay based on the things you've learned, looking at the model essays and looking at the chief reader notes. Do you think you can do these? Excellent. I'm curious though, because I learned so much from my students, and I want to learn a little bit from you here. What tips do you have? What's something that we haven't talked about that's going to help with the model essays? Try. That is so hard sometimes, isn't it? Absolutely. I think it's a tremendously helpful thing just to be able to start with that try. What are some of the other ideas that you have? You haven't written any essays yet? I see that. That's okay. Some teachers sort of prolonged that a bit because of the snafu, if you will, with the new rubrics. Okay, if you come up with anything, if you have a tip we didn't cover, add that down there in the chat box. We'll want to see what that is. Plus, I like to see what ideas you guys have. Okay, so model essay activity. This is an introduction paragraph for a sample essay. Go ahead and mark it up. See what you think about the introduction. Take just a minute. What do you see? Highlight the thesis statement and the topics in its yellow, quotes in pink, analysis in green, transitions and conclusions in orange. What do you see? Okay, got one. You send me any more? Okay, you ready? Can you submit it for me? 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Oh, look at you go. Okay, here we go. What do you notice? Absolutely. Look at you rock it out. Okay, are you ready for this one? What? It's the same sentence. Do you know why? Yeah, I bet you do know why. Because that's your thesis statement, right? So this sample essay, sample PP, does earn the thesis statement point. So this one's kind of a 1 or nothing, and this one gets it. So great job recognizing it. Now that you can recognize the thesis statement, you can write one, right? So we look at this. Throughout the letter, he applies a conciliatory yet forceful tone. He places the blame onto the British and continually repeats his plan for the march in order to convince the British to reverse their policies before he acts. So, okay. How about the body? What do you see about the body? Take just a minute, annotate it, look for it, what stands out. Remember, you want to put quotes in pink, analysis in green, transition and concluding sentence in orange, and of course, topic sentences in yellow. What do you see? What do you see? It's fun watching you work. Okay, are you ready? You want to submit what you got? So we can get started. Okay. I got 1. Okay, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Okay, you ready? So let's look at this one. Note that you have that yellow up at the top, you got the pink in the middle, and then you have the orange. So is the rest green? Is the rest just analysis? Now remember, we want to look at what, why, and how, right? So if our goal is to look at what and why and how, what if yours looked a little bit like this? Now, I realize that looks a little bit purple on the screen now, but I promise it was pink when I did it. So when you look at it, kind of the idea here is to create a stoplight. Do you see what I've done? Because I need to see more green than anything else, so I know it's a go. So I've just given this paragraph the stoplight test. Wouldn't it be helpful if you could do this to your papers too? You can. It's so fun. You have to think about it a little bit. But one thing I want to point out to you is note the placement of the pink. So you have kind of a lengthier looking paragraph, but you can see that the pink is, first of all, it's spread out. It's in multiple places. So there's 2 pieces of text evidence, of explicit text evidence. There's obviously some paraphrase here. When I look at a paragraph and I'm scoring it, I look for the what and I look for the why, and I actually mark the what and the why. So you can kind of see that here, okay? I actually mark the what and the why when I'm doing it. And that just helps with, I find, with the students who are really wanting to grow and to kind of push themselves a little bit further. I don't know if you can see this one just a little bit better. So you can kind of see that I've got that whole process in there too. So I like for my students when they're in peer review to go through and try to color code theirs as well. Okay, let me try another. Okay, this is a whole new essay. A whole new essay. This is sample E. So if you could look at sample E there for me for a minute and see what you see. So take just a minute. Same directions. Are you with me? This one's kind of challenging. Okay, so if we look at this one and just kind of see what we see, you can see that the essay, that this draft breaks down in a very different way when we're looking at the red light test, okay? First thing is I have one piece of text evidence for each of the body paragraphs, okay? The next thing I'm going to highlight is, do you remember we talked about how it was woven in, that we wanted to see that you could weave it together? This first one, it just jumps right out there at you in that first sentence. So you don't have a lot to work with or a lot to go with on that. So when you are looking at it, what I want you to kind of think about is, how do you bring it in? So another thing I'm going to point out with this particular essay is there's no yellow in the body paragraphs. And the yellow was the part where you were looking at the topic sentence, right? So there's not a clear topic sentence in that first paragraph. And that's something that we want to make sure that we have. So if we think about this one, this particular essay actually does earn the thesis point, but insofar as the evidence and the commentary, it actually scores a 2. So the previous one obviously was a 4, but this one, let me pull out my little notes here. On our commentary here, it specifies a few little things. I'm not sure if you guys noticed it, but when you were annotating it, did you notice it called it a flashback when it referenced the 1919 thing? Like it said, first, flashback to the year 1919 and the use of a metaphorical weapon. So that's not a flashback. Minor problem there, right? Now, we also see that it goes straight to the text evidence in both of those paragraphs. So you want to look at that and make sure that you have something before going straight to those to that text evidence. There's no transition. There's no topic in these two body paragraphs. You can see that there's the text evidence. It's not only less embedded. I wrote less embedded, but it's actually not embedded at all up there. So that's a bit of a problem. But you can kind of see that I've written down that kind of addresses the what, kind of addresses the why, not a lot. Down at the last one, I think that that was actually intended to be a third body paragraph. It does have a topic sentence. Lastly, Gandhi uses a metaphorical weapon, humility, to lead his people to get what they want. Lower taxes so all may have access to the salt coming from their own land. So that's an interesting thing there. But we kind of need a little bit more information in that. Like, what's happening there? So let's look at that just a little bit. We're not quite sure if we look at that follow through. The use of humility is a powerful message that he's not doing this for himself, which leaves him with a lot of peaceful protesters joining him. There's no text evidence there. So it's kind of ambiguous, not a lot discussed. There's a what, but I don't have a why. I don't have a how. So in that one, there's no explicit text evidence and there is no analysis of what's happening. So what do you guys think on that one? Now, here's where it gets creative, because do you remember when I was saying that if you agreed that you were willing to write, to study, to get better in your assessment, that, what did I say you could do to the lower scoring essays? Do you remember? you can fix them, right? So I would start with something like this. You've got a sample and you could go through and look at it and try to fix it. Me personally, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to fix the use of that flashback. That's not actually what's happening here. I might say something like referring back to the year 1919 or something like that, but I'm not going to go through and say that concept, that flashback thing, because it's not really what it is. But then I could go to that first paragraph and I can look at it and I can say, okay, so I can see that it's talking about using the word conversion. And I can see that it shows that he's choosing his words. So maybe they're talking about diction. It helps his letter flow and get across the certain point that he would like him to understand, which is what exactly? Also in the passage, he uses words such as sacred, disciplined, and movement to express why and how the things he mentions in the letter will be done. Some ambiguous language there that could probably use some clarification. Instead of a threat, he uses these words to signify a promise. So there are definitely some pieces of that original text that are in there. He does reference this letter is not in any way intended as a threat, but as a simple and sacred duty, peremptory on a civil register. So it's in that last paragraph. So there's some text evidence you could pull there. We could go through and look at it, and we can find where he uses these terms sacred, discipline, and movement throughout here. If it's coming from the text, put those in quotation marks to kind of communicate that. But even if that is the what, this probably needs a why, doesn't it? I agree, it needs a why. So when we're looking at it, we're trying to go through and figure it out. Do you want to try? You want to try to fix it and see what kind of feedback you get? So if you take that top piece up there, you can actually copy it and paste it into a text box. And then you can make changes in there and see what ideas you have. Take a little minute there. This is where you get some interaction. You can fix your paragraph and I'll give you some feedback. Just a minute on that. Starting to work on a little bit. I can see it. I can see it happening. One more minute. Now this one can be kind of hard, especially if you haven't read the prompt there for a minute. But you can start to kind of see the ideas behind it, right? Okay. You about ready? And make sure that we can look at it and talk about what kind of changes we got. So go ahead and submit for me. Have any submitted? Got one. Anyone else want to submit? I see 4 of you started it. Another little minute. Okay. Hi, I see you just joined. Okay, if you click on that little black arrow up there at the top, that'll let you have all the slides that you missed that we were talking about, so you can kind of see what they are. And then, of course, I'll send you the email with all the resources I send to everybody. Okay. Are you ready? You want to see what we got? I'm super excited. Okay. So now I'm going to remind you that when we first started, we only had a few people registered. And so I sent this out to the people who were registered yesterday, and they were able to read it and look at it. So when I asked you guys, you said you hadn't read it, and that was okay. And I was like, that's cool, because we'll still be able to do this and see where we're going with it, and maybe you'll remember it. So let's look at this one. So this person changed it to say, first, Gandhi's diction clearly gets his point, blah, blah, blah. So you can see this person maybe hasn't read the article, and that's totally okay, but they recognize that we need a topic sentence, that's going to be what helps us to get it across. So then it gives the text evidence, states in lines. I have deliberately used the word conversion, for my ambition is no less than to convert the British people through nonviolence. Okay, this is great. This shows that the author is carefully choosing his words as it helps his letter flow and gets across a certain point he would like Erwin to understand. So I can see that you corrected a few of the grammar errors that were already in there. And then we have this sentence, this works because, absolutely. So using those two pieces already increases the strength of this pretty messed up paragraph, because you've added a topic sentence, which kind of lets us know what you're talking about. And then you have added the what makes it work. So we've got the what, and then we're starting to see, excuse me, we're starting to see the why, and then it brings in the this works because. So this is the how does it work piece. So absolutely. Obviously, we would want to work on that second part of that paragraph as well, but this is a huge improvement, wouldn't you say? Like, especially since I only give you 2 minutes, right? Okay, so our goal tonight was that through the use of model essays, you'd be able to create a game plan to write rhetorical analysis essays that include a link to the thesis statement, that embed text evidence, and that provide a thorough explanation of how the evidence supports the claim. And so we had a few steps that we took tonight to get us there. We started out by going through and we reviewed our expectations with what we here at Fiveable in the Lang section, what we recommend in terms of the writing plan. And then we looked at some tips. How can you use the model essay to help you as you go through? So we looked at it a couple of ways. Number one, in general. Number two, how could you do it if you're not going to write the essay? And then number three, how could you do it if you're going to write the essay as an outline, or if you're going to actually write the whole essay? So how do you learn and grow using these sample essays that are available on the College Board website? And now you know, right? So you've come up with a plan. We've also looked at how you can take the essays that are not so great and you can fix them. We looked at this idea of embedding text evidence because you don't want to just take a whole piece of text and throw it in. And the strategy that we gave you there was the red light test. Go through topics and thesis in yellow. You want to make sure you have those. They're really important. Text evidence that explicit, that's in quotes, put that in pink. Your analysis piece, that's going to be that whole part of why it's done and how it's done. Highlight that in green. You need to make sure you got the green light to go on. That's how you get better at your body paragraphs. And then we talked about that thorough explanation. So it wasn't just that you used the red light test, but that you made sure that you listed what it was, why it was, and how it created that impact. So looking at our learning intention, do you feel a bit better? I think so too. Okay, I have a question that just popped up. The question was, is it possible to save a vague thesis with strong topic sentences? So you may have covered in your classes this concept of an open thesis statement and a closed thesis statement. An open thesis statement is kind of where you might say Gandhi uses a variety of strategies in order to present the case that Britain's control is not fair to his people, or whatever it is, however you want to say that. But a closed thesis statement is going to be some of the ones that we've looked at with our 2 model essays that we looked at tonight, the ones that say this, this, and this. So right now, given the new rubric, I personally am recommending that my students use a closed thesis statement structure because of the fact that it is more clearly aligned with what it says in the rubric, that it has to be a defensible thesis statement that outlines the writer's choices. So the question of, can you save a vague thesis with a strong topic sentence? Right now, if you go through and you look at the sample essays that are provided with the new rubrics, I'm hesitantly going to say yes. You kind of can, because it does specify on some of the rubric areas, it'll say things like, it can be found throughout, because they do recognize that this is a timed essay and it is treated like a draft. However, I would encourage you to really work on that thesis statement structure that you're going to use so that you can bring in a stronger thesis statement from the start. Because if your reader has to kind of figure out what in the world you're talking about up at the very beginning, then it can help you out along the bottom because they can kind of figure it out along the way. But wouldn't it be an easier thing to score if it was right there for you up at the top? So I think that's a great question. I do think that there is some validity to it, that you want to make sure that those strong topic sentences are there because they can help you. But I personally am telling all of my students, based on the training that College Board did with the webinar a few weeks ago with the rubrics, based on the way the rubric is actually written and based on the sample essays, I'm telling all my students, close thesis statement, baby. Close thesis statement. So, all right. So we've done a lot tonight. Do you feel like you've learned a lot? I totally feel like we've learned a lot.